Three of these are true statements and one not so true. Can you figure out which ones are which? So let me read the statements because I know the font is little. And then I want you to put a number in the comments for which statement you think is not so true. So number one says districts can deny a parent's request for an evaluation. If you think that's not so true, type number one. Number two, districts can decide your child no longer needs special education services. If you think number two is the false statement, type 2 in the comments. And let's look three. There are times when the district can evaluate your child without your permission. If you think three is false, type 3. And the last statement says, assessments need to address your child's strengths and needs. So let's see what you're guessing. I know when I posted this, a lot of people were saying number 3 was the not so true statement. So let's see what you guys think today. If you are new to our show, let me introduce myself. I am Charmaine Tanner. I have an adult son with Down syndrome who receives special ed services, inclusive special ed services when he was in school. And I wrote a book that's on Amazon, and you can get your very own copy. It's called The Art of Advocacy, a Parent's Guide to a Collaborative IEP Process. And this actually was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. But what I do now, since I've retired from teaching, is I am a full-time professional advocate. So I work a lot with individual families, helping them speak up and be an even more effective advocate for their child. I also host this weekly free training so every parent can get the information that they need. So say howdy to us so we can say hi back. And we are going to be looking today at some evaluation tips and maybe little known facts about evaluations. So welcome to our show, and we shall get started here. So these are questions that I've had come in, and the first one says, my son is having his first special education evaluation. How long does a school have to finish the testing? So if you remember your child's maybe first evaluation ever for special education, or if your child is in the process of getting reevaluated, you want to be sure that you know about timelines. Now, many parents have heard that the evaluation needs to be completed in 60 days. The caution is that you need to know what your state regulations are, because sometimes there can be exceptions. For instance, let me go back here just one more. So for instance, in Idaho, it talks about the 60-day calendar for completing the testing and getting to eligibility. But there's this little exception in the state regulations that say if there's a break in school for 5 consecutive days, then the district is not responsible for continuing to assess. So what does that mean in plain language? It means if your state regulation has an exception like that, they don't have to continue the evaluation and get that assessment done over the summer or over winter break. So you need to really know what your state regs say If you need help finding them, let me know. Just put in the comments what state you're from. And if you need help finding your state regs, I'd be happy to do that with you. So it makes a huge difference. Now, in another state, for instance, Colorado, they just have that 60-day calendar time frame, and that includes even over the summer. So if your child has an initial evaluation that starts in May and you live in a state like Colorado, they have to finish that testing even if it means they're working during the summer. So that's one of the big things that you want to make sure that you understand, because there's probably always these exceptions, right? Now, I think the other misunderstanding is that parents think the 60-day timeline is to finish the testing, when really the 60-day timeline is they have to not only complete the testing, but also determine eligibility, which means you have to have an eligibility meeting within those 60 days. But let's look. One, the clock doesn't start until you've signed the district's consent form. Now, I used to encourage parents to send a letter or an email to the district asking about, requesting a special ed evaluation for their child. But you know what happened is that so many districts started saying, we got your email, but you need to come in and sign the official form in order for that clock to start ticking. So make sure that you sign that official consent for evaluations form in order for that 60 calendar day clock to start ticking. Now, the other thing that you need to be aware of, in most states, the 60 calendar day clock is for initial evaluations. So the very first time a student gets evaluated for special education, they would have that 60 calendar day frame. If it's a reevaluation, there's really no specific timeline in the federal regs. So again, you have to go back to your state regs to see what it says. Is that time frames also pertinent to reevaluations? So there are little, tweaks here and there that we need to always be aware of. Hey, Kimberly. Kimberly's from Iowa, and Kimberly is also one of our parent trailblazers. I need to get some mugs that say parent trailblazer, but I'll raise that parent mug to you, Kimberly. And thanks for coming with us and being here with us live. So let's continue on. I'm going to switch over here. It's always okie dokie. I have a new thing that I'm doing. So if you would like to get an ebook from this show, what I need you to do is to type it in the comments, ebook, and my IEP bot should be awake. So what I just started doing last week after last week's training was to put the information into a PDF, into, a 12-page or whatever handout that you can have. And I'm hoping that this is like a valuable resource. You can either download it or you can just keep it on your computer for reference. But if you want to get our ebook that will be coming out Tuesday from this training, just let us know in the comments and we can make that happen. Now, another common question I get is, I haven't given consent for the district to reevaluate my child. Is it true that the district can do it anyway? So this is one of our statements, right, that we were trying to figure out, is this true or not so true? there are times when the district can reevaluate your child, even if you haven't given permission. And it depends. So there's different circumstances if it's an initial evaluation or a reevaluation. So because most of you already have students or children that are eligible for special ed services, we're going to concentrate on the reevaluation. So if the district has been trying to contact you and you haven't responded, and if they can have documented evidence to show that they've taken all kinds of measures to get you to consent and you're not responding, the district can go ahead and reevaluate your child. Now, another question is, the special ed teacher said my daughter doesn't need to continue to have special ed services. Can the school just decide that? So this is one of those, is it real or not real, right? And what we find is that your child would need to be reevaluated before the team could decide if your child is still eligible for special education services or supports. So what I have found with some of the families that I work with is sometimes special ed teachers will say, your child's made lots of progress. We don't think they need to be on an IEP anymore. They'll call an IEP meeting and they'll present their, case as to why your child has been making so much progress, why they don't need it. And they'll have the IEP team make a decision whether or not to continue special ed services. Well, they forgot this one important step there, and that is you have to have a reevaluation before you can exit somebody from special ed services. So if this happens, I know I've had a couple families I've worked with where the school is like, I don't think they need the IEP anymore. Let's just switch to a 504 plan. Well, you always want to consider that as an option, but you need to consent and have a reevaluation before they can stop any special ed services or support. So if you know other parents that need this kind of information, make sure you let them know about our weekly show here and type in eBook if you want a free eBook from today's show. Our next question is, why do all the assessments focus on what my son can't do? I mean, how many times do we go to IEP or ARD meetings as parents, and after an evaluation has been done, it's just this, doom and gloom kind of atmosphere of all the things that your child can't do. And so one of the things that I think is important is to look back at where the staff, the administrators are coming from, their point of view. And many of them have been trained in this medical model where they feel like what their job is to find out what's wrong with your child and then come up with a plan to fix what's wrong. And so if they come from this set of values, then yes, they're going to be looking at all the things that your child can't do. However, we want to remind them that we also, it's also important that when we're doing evaluations, that we're looking at what your child's strengths are, what kind of a learner they are, how they learn best, what strategies work. Because that information we also want embedded in the evaluation report, because then that evaluation report informs what's going to be written in the IEP. So you need to start building your case for your child's strengths at the evaluation time, right? And so if we look at What the federal regulations say is that assessments will also assist in determining the contents of the child's IEP. And as we know, there are sections in the IEP where the team needs to write in the student's strengths, their present levels. All of that is parts in the IEP where you can make sure strengths are embedded. So this is a rationale that you can give a friendly reminder to the staff that we also want to be identifying strengths when we're doing the evaluation. Another common question is, I heard someone say that if I requested special education testing for my child, a district could refuse my request. Is that true? Now, I know when I worked at Peak Parent Center, which is Colorado's Parent Training and Information Center, we would often get calls from parents and they would be shocked when we would tell them the answer to this question. So yes, guess what? The district can refuse your request for an evaluation. And this you may find shocking. I don't think it necessarily happens that often, but you need to be prepared. I think there are some parents out there that believe and share with other parents that all you have to do is request an evaluation and you'll get it. Because that's not often always the case, right? There are times when the district will decide that an assessment or an evaluation is not needed. The trick is, let me show you, the trick is that you want to make sure that you get a prior written notice explaining what the district considered, what evidence or documentation they used to come to the conclusion that an evaluation wasn't needed at this time. Now, this past year, I was working with a mom who had a young boy in kindergarten, and she had been talking to the school since the fall about his struggles and her concerns, and she just kept kind of getting pushed away. And it was like, oh, it's something that we see kids grow out of. He's a boy, he's young, all of these kinds of excuses. And the mom just month after month kept saying something isn't right here. It's just not picking up on these concepts. It's, there's got to be something going on here. And we were able, once she had me come as an advocate for her at the meetings, that yes, indeed, there were some concerns. The mom went ahead and paid for a private evaluation. And it did point out some significant learning concerns. But sometimes without having somebody at the table with you, it can be hard for a parent to know exactly the words to say, how to ask the right questions. But know that, yes, the district can say no to you, even if you request an evaluation. And that can take additional advocacy on your part to make sure that evaluation happens. So make sure you're saying hi in the comments. Let us know what some of your experiences have been when getting an accurate and useful evaluation from the school district. I know Pete Wright, the famous special education attorney, talks about getting private evaluations done by qualified people and having that, report. And he finds that is really valuable, and not to just rely on the school district's evaluation. Some parents can do that private evaluation and have their insurance pay for it. There are other ways if you want to ask for an independent education evaluation and have the district pay for it. And I have some previous videos about IEEs. So if you'd like to know that, let me know in the comments and we can get that resource out to you also. Another question that I've gotten from parents is, how many tests does a school really have to give my son to see if they're eligible for special ed services? If you're like me, even though I was a special ed teacher and had to do a lot of testing of students, I want to make sure that we're doing only what we need to do, right? I mean, I don't know how many kids would find it exciting to walk down the hall and sit in this little room with a stranger and having the stranger ask them all kinds of questions, especially questions that they're unsure of, or have them do tasks that they don't excel in. So we don't want our kids to be over-tested, right? But we also want to make sure that we get valuable information. And that's why in part 1 of this series, last week, we talked about sitting down with that team, because you're a member of the evaluation team, and talking about which would be appropriate assessments and which ones, aren't really necessary at this time. So you really want to have that conversation with the team before any of these assessments are done. But let's look here. The obligation that the evaluation team has is that they do have to review current records. And they have to assess in all areas of suspected disability. So when we talk about reviewing records, the evaluation team has that responsibility to see what information they already have. Maybe the parent did provide a speech and language evaluation from the private SLP. Maybe the parent provided a sensory profile from the private OT that had recently been done. Look at the class records, any kind of in-class assessments, all of that. The team should be looking at and seeing, okay, we already have that area covered. We really don't need to assess anymore in that area. Or no, we're really missing this part and we really want to kind of dig a little bit deeper here. So after they review their current records, then an individualized, customized evaluation plan should be there for your child as far as which evaluations are really needed at this time. So I call this the Goldilocks rule. And I actually use the Goldilocks rules for lots of different things. But, oops, let me go back. So the Goldilocks rule. So this is the whole concept that we only want what's necessary. We don't want too much testing. We don't want too few of assessments being given. We want the just right amount. So when in doubt, think about Goldilocks and the Goldilocks rule as far as how many assessments are really needed in order to have the team feel like they've captured a good picture of your child as far as being a learner. Again, if you just joined us, I see we have some new live viewers with us. Hey there, type ebook in the comments below and you will get a ebook emailed to you on Tuesday after I write it about today's show. Also, if you are watching the replay, you can still write questions, make comments. Let us know about some questions that you might have about evaluations, because we want to make sure that we are individualizing and gearing our trainings to questions that you have. So the more interactive you are, like here, Kimberly said ebook, the more we can, and Judy's here. Hey, Judy. The more we can make sure that this is worthwhile for you. So if you have any questions about evaluations, if you want to share a comment or a situation that happened, go ahead and type that into the comments and we will get to you. Now, another question I've had is, can a district file for a due process hearing if I refuse to let them test my child? Now, there are some times when you might want to give consent for some evaluations and not for others. For instance, when our son Dylan was in school, we never gave consent for any kind of IQ testing. So when the district kept bringing that up every 3 years, we kept saying, no, thank you. So we would not sign for that type of testing on the consent form. But if he needed an updated speech language assessment, something like that, we would sign for that. Well, there are some states, like I had a mom last week talk about in California, if you don't sign for an evaluation, the district just has this kind of practice where they do file for due process over that. So again, knowing kind of the nuances of what happens in your district and surrounding districts in your state, all of that can really be helpful information. But let's go back here and look. So is this true? Could they really file due process? So again, this depends on if it's for an initial evaluation or for a re-evaluation, because they have different sets of regulations. So let's say it's a case where the parent refuses to consent for that first evaluation, that initial evaluation. The district can file for a due process hearing. And if the hearing officer rules that the assessment is appropriate and the parents don't appeal, the district can legally do that assessment. So again, this is the kind of information that you want to make sure that you fully understand. And that you can, what I think is really helpful when parents work with an advocate is that you can really strategize with the advocate. Like if we say this, what do we think the district might do? What would our next step be? And you're predicting what's going to happen, and you're kind of laying out your strategy before you go into that evaluation meeting, before you go into that IEP or ARD meeting. And so it's not just a matter of signing or not signing an evaluation consent form. It's a matter of knowing what your strategy is, knowing what information you are trying to get so that your child in the end gets that education that they deserve, because that's what we're all about, right? It's not about fighting at meetings and figuring out all these regulations. It's about making sure your kid gets what your kid needs at school. So that's our ultimate goal with everything that we talk about on this show and also elsewhere. So let's go back. Here's these 3 truths and 1 not so truth. Which ones are which? So let's look. If you think number 1 is true, you are right. The district can deny a parent's request for an evaluation. If you think number 2 is not so true, you are correct. Districts can decide your child no longer needs special education services. And this is not so true because they would have to do a reevaluation before your child would be exited from special ed services. Number 3, there are times when the district can evaluate your child without your permission. And this is true, especially if parents aren't responding to the request to do the evaluation. And our 4th statement is also true, which says assessments need to address your child's strengths and needs. And I was surprised. I thought people were going to pick this one as the one that was not true. because I think people are so ingrained in that we only hear about what our kids can't do when we get evaluations. But make it a point, and also make it a point when you're doing your parent report for the evaluation team, that you're talking about your child's strengths. We want the evaluation, yes, to look at areas of needs and where your child struggles. But the real beauty is when we find out how your child does learn best, so we can incorporate that into the IEP, which therefore makes the teacher accountable for teaching your child through their strengths. So not only in the beginning part of the IEP are you going to be talking about strengths, but when you look at the accommodations section, you're going to be talking about strengths, because all of those accommodations should be coming from what will help your child learn in a more appropriate way, right? So thank you for being here. I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. Hey, Corey. We have Corey with us from Alabama. And Corey is also one of our parent trailblazers. And if you'd like more information about our Parent Trailblazer membership group, let me know in the comments and I can get back with you. So Corey and others, I don't know if you guys have any specific questions about evaluations, and maybe, questions that you've heard, or, statements that you've heard from, to kind of dispel those myths that you might be hearing about and clear up any misconceptions about this special ed journey and what your rights and responsibilities are, and how we can make sure that your child is safe, happy, learning every day at school beside their friends, because that is our ultimate goal when we are putting that advocacy hat on for our kiddos. So I don't see any other, here we go. Corey says, do you know of a specific evaluation or assessment for working memory, executive function? Yay, good question, Corey. The one that I really like for this is called the BRIEF. So it's an acronym, and of course I can't remember all the words now, but BRIEF, B-R-I-E-F. And the BRIEF not only is a good assessment for working memory and other executive functioning skills, but the thing that I really like about it is it gives the teacher, which also gives the parent, ideas and strategies of what to do for, different areas that are challenging for executive functioning skills, like organization or working memory, things like that. So the BRIEF is one. It's like a lot of behavior things. It's more of a checklist. It's not like sit down and take this test. But the student can answer it, the parents can answer it, the teachers can answer it. You can get everyone's viewpoint. And like I said, then the best part is to make sure that the teacher taps into what strategies are recommended with the BRIEF. And then as a parent, I would say to the teacher, I heard the BRIEF has, all these strategies and ideas. Can you share those with me? And so that would be really helpful. Let's see. And Corey says, this could be used to create a better list of accommodations to be included in the IEP. Oh, exactly. And that's the beauty, I think, of when we really focus on our, children's strengths, is that we want teachers then to use that information to not only inform their instructional strategies, but also how they motivate our child, the accommodations that we're going to be writing that are going to be specific and really carved out for our child versus just this laundry list of accommodations that so many times we see. So yeah, this can be really helpful. So thank you, Corey, for being here and engaging and interacting. We like that. Next week, we have an advocate from Michigan, and she is going to be talking about filing Office of Civil Rights complaints. Marcy Lipset is the advocate. She has filed hundreds, maybe more, maybe thousands of Office of Civil Rights complaints. And she will be telling us about her journey with that and the results that she has seen from filing those OCR complaints. The following week is the 4th of July, and we won't have a show on the 4th of July. July 11th, our next Thursday, we are crossing our fingers that will work for my son Dylan to come on and do a show with us about post-secondary education and inclusive college opportunities for students. So that is our lineup for the next few weeks. I hope that you will continue making comments on this thread in our Visions and Voices Together Facebook page. And until next Thursday, I want to wish you a wonderful ending to your week, and